Hello, everyone. This is Global Purpose Live. I'm Emanuel Kuntzelman, founder and president of Greenheart International and one of the initiators of the Global Purpose Movement. And here with us today is Dr. Cassandra Vieten, old friend and pioneer, really, of the social change movement worldwide. Cassandra is the president of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where she's worked for the last 16 years. She's also a scientist at the Mind-Body Medicine Research Group at the California Pacific Medical Center, an author. She's written the book Living Deeply, Mindful Motherhood, Your Child's First Year, numerous other articles. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, has her doctor's degree from the California Institute of Integral Studies, and above all, just a beautiful person, a leading voice in scientific research involved with consciousness and social change today. Cassie, welcome to Global Purpose Live. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thanks, Emanuel. It's a pleasure.
Well, it's our pleasure to talk to you today. Always find your insights on these things quite enlightening. So let's delve right into things. You know, we have the Purpose Summit coming up next November 11th and 12th in San Francisco at Dogpatch Studios. You're going to be a keynote speaker there and an integral part of this whole purpose movement. You and I really helped found it in the early days here, what we now call Global Purpose Movement. So really looking forward to your contributions at the Purpose Summit. So I'd like to focus a little bit on that and your work on making change happen. You really seem to be on the cutting edge of what it really takes to make change happen. And to that regard, I might just start off by saying, you know, in a recent article you've written that's you're contributed to the anthology on purpose we have coming out with the conference called Purpose Rising. You make the statement that a common misunderstanding is that the best way to make change is to provide people with lots of information that supports what you want them to do differently. Then you kind of go on to say, actually, that is a misunderstanding. Information only provides about 10% of what it takes to make change. Can you expand on that a little bit and help us work through this very broad misconception?
Sure. Well, there's a model that was kind of popular in the 70s called the information deficit model, which basically said that the reason that the populace is not engaging in behaviors that are more healthy for themselves and for one another and for the planet is that they just don't have the information. So we've got to get the information out to them. And so that's everything from things like the 4 food groups, and now they use the plate method, to information about the risks of smoking, to information about climate change. What you'll see is that most of our society's major movements are made up of about 90% delivery of information and about 10% of sort of community building and recommendations for action and things like that. And that 90% is way too much emphasis on information, because if human beings thought logically and if the mind was the primary instigator, and I'm talking about the narrative thinking mind, not kind of the capital M mind that we talk about in terms of consciousness, if that thinking mind was what called the shots, all of us would eat healthy, exercise daily. You know, these are very simple things that we could do for our health, and we all know exactly what they are. But clearly, what causes our actions is much more complicated than just information.
Yeah, it sure is. We could only wish it would be as simple as getting the information and doing the right thing, but
Right.
evidently we are much more complicated beings than it seems. So you talk about there's 10% kind of a motivational aspect also involved in making change happen, but the primary thing, the remaining 80%, the sort of dark energy, if you will, behind transformation is what you call worldview transformation. Can you tell us a little bit what that means, how it might work?
Sure. Well, for many years at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, we've been examining this process that we call worldview transformation, and it really came out of our founders' experience in space. So for those of you who are watching who don't know, our founder was the Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth person to walk on the moon. And like many other astronauts did, on his way back to the Earth from his moonwalk, he was at the window of the space capsule and just had this incredibly powerful, profound experience viewing the Earth from space, from that vantage point. And it really changed the way he viewed himself and others in the world for the rest of his life. And one of those changes for him was feeling everything, not just thinking it, but feeling it and knowing that everything was completely interconnected, that the molecules of his body were the same as the molecules of the space capsule and the sun and the moon and the stars and the Earth. And then also looking at the Earth from space and noticing that there are no real boundaries between countries. Those are just things that humans have imagined and made up, and now that we fight over all the time. And that there is clearly enough water and food and shelter and resources to support everyone on the planet. And it's only our thinking that keeps us from creating solutions for distribution of those resources that might work. And so that's a profound example of a worldview shift that was stimulated by this very unusual ability to see the Earth from space. But many, many people on Earth have had that kind of a worldview transformation, whether it's because they made it to the top of a mountain and had a beauty-inspiring experience that shifted the way they looked at the world, or for many people, the birth of a child, or things that are very beautiful and overwhelming can cause these shifts in worldview. But also, and even more common, are that very painful and deconstructive experiences can cause this shift in worldview as well. And the particular kind of shift in worldview we were looking at was people who reoriented their lives around creating not only health and well-being for themselves and their families, but for others and for the world and for the planet. So people who really had this massive shift where all of a sudden they made their life about service and oriented toward love and compassion and caring. And they often found, almost to a person, found that the happiness that they had been seeking for their entire lives through acquisition and accolades and achievements was being found now through being of service and having a purpose, as you would say, for the global purpose movement. So the question was, how do those shifts happen, and how can we make more of them happen instead of waiting for them randomly to strike people like lightning? And so for a couple of decades now, we've been collecting people's stories of transformation, investigating transformative experiences, testing transformative practices, really looking at it from every angle you can imagine. And so now we're applying that to people who want to create change in the world. How can they harness what we know about worldview transformation to be more effective change agents?
Well, indeed. So the first step into this is clearly a direct, personal, profound experience, as you explain. We can't all stand on the moon and look at planet Earth, but we've all had other similar profound experiences. So that's clearly the case. Are you doing any work or trying to facilitate that profound experience in people? Is there something we can do that rather than just randomly hope that
Right.
something will come across people's minds and make that shift happen?
Yeah. I mean, we know actually a lot of the religions and wisdom traditions and more modern transformative traditions are really built to create those transformations, either on a mini level or on a massive level. So people who engage in transformative workshops or practices or yoga or meditation, or they pursue their religious practice in a way that is engaged, not just kind of rotely following dogma, but really engaging with what is the part of their spiritual path. All of those were really created to create transformation. And now in the modern day, we have all kinds of new things that can help us create transformation. For one thing, we have access to the world's spiritual and wisdom traditions that is unprecedented. So somebody who grows up in Iowa can engage on video in some of the deepest Hindu transformative practices, that have been developed throughout millennia. So that's one change. The second is that we have new technologies of transformation that I think are really exciting. So we're, for example, working on developing virtual reality approaches to mimicking the Edgar experience, or putting people into positions where we can manipulate the environment to create some of the conditions we know will foster those kinds of changes. So one, for example, is awe. The experience of awe, or encountering a vastness that is very difficult to fit into your current meaning structures, is often a transformative experience for people. So being out in nature, exposing people to vast vistas is a really good approach. But for people who can't make it there, we're hoping that these virtual reality experiences might be able to give them a flavor of that. And it sort of right sizes you. When you're in your life as the agent of your life, you feel like you're so big. You feel like my consciousness has me taking up about 90% of it, and that's kind of how we are. It's like we've got these peripheral people around us, but pretty much it's all about me. When you have those experiences, it right sizes you. It brings you down to maybe 50% of what you're experiencing is me, and the other 50% is the whole environment and world. And then as you move further, you get even smaller, and that smallness is not meant to make you feel diminished. In fact, it makes you feel much more a part of a greater whole. And it's kind of interesting. The more you find your own humility and your interconnection with other people and your role as a service person, the more you also find your particular unique strengths and resources that only you can bring to this conversation or to this next step. And so you become, in a way, more purposeful, even though you might feel a little bit less personally important to the world.
Beautiful point there, yes, and well taken here. So once we've kind of managed to right size ourselves, I would assume that the practices, training, or tools maybe that we've used to initiate that experience then become critically important to keep this process of world transformation going. Can you elaborate on that? Am I right? Is that a critical component of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we hope is that through this, I'm working on this new project called C3, or Consciousness, Communication, and Change. And it's taking cognitive science, neuroscience, social science on one hand, what we know about what changes people's minds and what maintains those changes, and then also some wisdom from the world's spiritual traditions, and using those to make a different form of change making. So let's say you were given an hour to go into a large company and try to help them shift their practices around being more green. A lot of people might go in for that 1 hour and, as we've said, spend 90% of the hour giving them information. This is how much pollution companies put in the air, and this is how much yours does, and this is what you could do differently. And 5 minutes for Q&A or something like that, and then they hope that had an impact. I think what I've learned, and I mean, I'm very guilty of this. I've been, doing these talks my whole life, just, yakking away with my PowerPoint behind me. What I might do instead is go in with 3 main points that I want to make and spend some of that hour getting people into an experience somehow that allows them to feel with their whole being, their whole body, their emotions, and their mind, maybe through storytelling, maybe through music, maybe through video. There's some different ways that you can give people fully embodied experiences. Then I'd probably partner them up with some of their colleagues to discuss this issue. And then we'd talk about what could be continued beyond that 1 hour for the next 6 weeks in community to keep exploring. That's a totally different approach. And that comes straight out of this transformation research, that we know that people have to have personal experiences that include their emotions and their bodies, and maybe even their spirits in what they're learning, not just their intellectual minds. We know they have to have community and share it almost immediately with other people, and share it in an ongoing way with people, and feel like other people are doing it with them, to be a member of something. We know that they need to have ongoing practices that remind them of how they want to be and who they want to be. And then those 3 points that you're making in the information piece of it actually have fertile ground to plant themselves in, to grow, rather than kind of scattering seeds and hoping that one of them takes seed, without a lot of fertile soil for them to grow in.
Yeah, exactly right. So this component of connecting people, developing relationships, and having community support seems critically important in this world view shift. At the Global Purpose Movement, we're entertaining, developing the idea of creating purpose circles just to that end, to create small, localized communities where people who are in the process of finding their purpose, but that they have this support and sharing structure. Do you feel
it's hugely important. Really, I've used this example frequently of a study that I heard about of 2 different cities that were trying to get people to recycle their plastic bottles. And one used signs that said, please recycle your plastic bottles, it's good for the planet. The other one said, please join the 70% of your neighbors who are recycling their plastic bottles, it's good for the planet. And the second one, of course, was much more effective because people felt like they were a member of something. They felt like they were joining their community. And even just that slight shift of making someone feel like a member of something is very, very powerful. Most of these transformational doing things differently than you've been taught to do them your whole life, even if they make total sense logically, the unfamiliarity of a new pathway is very dangerous socially. And so keeping the same status quo in a community keeps you bonded with the community. And when you start to venture out into a different way of thinking, it puts you at risk socially for ostracization, for ridicule, for shunning, maybe even for banishment. This is at a deep evolutionary kind of level. And so you really need to know somewhere that there's some safety in what you're doing next, that there are other people doing it, that you've got support doing it. And that's true for a nurse who's trying to bring a little bit of integrative medicine into a hospital that's never had it there before, or a change agent who's saying, hey, I don't think we should have plastic bottles on our campus anymore. It's totally logical. It makes all the sense in the world. But that person is really risking the hostility of other people who really don't want to give up their plastic bottles, even though they know that it's the right thing to do. So that community support is very, very important.
Well, it certainly is. And all of this put together, your interest is this kind of combination of psychology, biology, spirituality, where this merges together to create the atmosphere for this worldview transformation. You've described it as an ecosystem of change.
Mm-hmm.
You want
Right.
to tell us a little bit of how you see that ecosystem and what we can do to help it develop?
Yeah, well, it really is sort of like a garden. You know, if you're a gardener and you plant a seed, you know, you don't then crack open the seed and pull the sapling out of it. That's not how gardening works. You provide soil with nutrients, you provide stakes in the ground, you provide water and sunlight and shelter. And that's how the natural growth of an idea or a transformative movement takes place. So our job as change agents is not to make other people change. And you know, if you're out to make people change, I wish you luck, because that is not how it works. What you can do is create the ideal and optimal conditions for the natural process of what Maslow would have called self-actualization, or people moving toward more wholeness, to take place. Because the only reason people aren't moving toward more wholeness is that they feel fear, they feel threatened, they feel like it's not possible. So your job is to make things safe, to make them less threatening, to make things seem more possible. And when you can do that through a lot of different means to create this ecosystem that has the water and the nutrients and the sunlight and allows for a lot of diversity. That's the other thing about an ecosystem, is that diversity is the strength of an ecosystem. So it's also not really about finding a lot of people that you can think exactly the same way as, and you can do exactly the same things as, and we all become these, you know, copies of each other in terms of making change. You want a very active, dynamic, diverse ecosystem of people who are creating change, which means that you as a change agent have to be more sophisticated than just proposing a new dogma. If you have an old dogma that you want to replace, the best way to replace it is not to create a new dogma that's going to become outdated. It's to bust open the idea that dogma works at all and have a flexible, dynamic, ever-growing system, because that's really the truth of what's happening. We just pretend that we can lock it down.
Yeah. Well, yeah, to quote you, you said the strength of the mind to resist a shift in worldview is tremendous. And you've obviously thought a lot about that as to how to get this bipartisan, shall we say, approach to a non-dogmatic change system and develop this whole environmental ecosystem of change. Do you think that's possible to implement those kinds of ideas into our divisive political framework that we're all living through today?
I do. I mean, I believe that, you know, from my perspective, the target audience right now for people who are more progressive or looking for, you know, a more just and sustainable society is not so much the opposite side. So let's say there are, if you use a regular bell curve, there may be 20% of people who are very progressive. They might even be called radical. There are 20% of people who are very conservative. Those 20% of people who are that conservative, that's not our target audience. They're not going to move or shift very easily or quickly, if at all. It's really those 60% of people in the middle who are not 100% sure, but they are leaning one way or the other, but they could be open to something else. They have pain points that are not being addressed. And I mean, you know, one easy thing, I think, to integrate into the whole movement is to move beyond railing about what we don't like and what we wish wasn't happening and what's wrong and how, you know, awful it is, and to move into presenting an alternative vision that is inspiring. You know, Martin Luther King did not get up and say, I hate how it is. He got up and said, I have a dream. And that is a different way of looking at this. And what I can say now, as I was mentioning to you earlier before our call, Emanuel, is, I'm on a lot of listservs that are sending me lots of emails about what's happening in society today. And I looked at 20 of them this morning, and the subject lines were, I'm angry, I'm horrified, resist, awful, terrible. And, this is not about being Pollyanna. Maybe some proportion of the messages need to say, this is not normal. This is not right. Do not get immune to what is happening. It's not okay. But they've got to be paired with alternative visions. And if they're not paired with alternative visions, we're not giving anyone anything new to go toward.
Well, thank you for that beautiful vision there. So we've set the ecosystem, we're planting our garden, but do you have a dream? Do you have a vision of not only how this can work out, but what it might look like? Is it within reach of a generation here? What's your dream, Cassie?
Well, I'll start with how. I actually believe that we know, with what we know now, we have there wouldn't even need to be a single new innovation at this moment in time to do 100 times better in education, in how we treat the planet, in healthcare, in our own personal lives, in business, with what we already know now and some relatively simple shifts. Again, it's really not so much the shift in the strategy, it's the shift in people's mindset that would make every educational encounter, every healthcare encounter, everything we try to make happen to improve the world so much more successful. And that is simply just bringing back in the meaning and the purpose and the spirit and the emotion, the symbolic world, the inner world. That's why I've dedicated so much of my life to the Institute of Noetic Sciences, because I truly believe that we've unbalanced ourselves toward a hyper-emphasis on just the material world and just the intellectual part of things. There's part of society that's unbalanced themselves towards the opposite, which is an anti-scientism or an a superstitious, completely faith-based viewpoint. And it's really only when we bring those two together that we can re-enchant the world, that we could make classrooms meaningful and engaging and fascinating and interesting for children. And we can make healthcare encounters not just about drugs and surgery, but also about the meaning of your illness and all of the 17 other things you can do while you're receiving the surgery and the drugs for your illness. And the same throughout. So I just envision a world that's much more enchanting and magical and fascinating and full of art and beauty and mixed with rigorous science and technological innovation, and not taking away any of the progress that we've made as a society on that scientific and technological front, just knowing that you can make those advancements without sacrificing heart and meaning and spirit and purpose. And if we go back to the political question, I think that's the shift that needs to be made in people who are progressives, who are working toward sustainability and fairness in our world, is to recapture the vision of JFK and Martin Luther King and, some of those folks who even, Obama had it to a certain extent, who really had not just the information, but the depth of feeling and the depth of vision that can take us to the next step.
Well, I certainly want to share in that vision you have as well. Do you think it's fair to say that a lot of these visions of the power of Martin Luther King or Kennedy, do they tap into a kind of overlooked or underplayed spiritual value or norm in society that maybe our materialistic society has caused us to lose sight of? Is that why they're so powerful? Is there a shared spiritual value system behind our democratic processes and our ability to build a new vision for the future?
I absolutely think so. And if people aren't comfortable with the word spiritual, you could just say a kind of deeper meaning or purpose behind what you're doing. But, you know, at IONS, we have this hypothesis that you've got, if you were to look at a mountain peak or a mountain or an iceberg, and you see the tip of the mountain peak or the top of the iceberg is what we kind of experience in everyday reality. And that's where you want to give people the information and the facts. And it seems like if they just heard those, they would understand and we'd all logically move forward. Well, there's this whole under the surface level of things, our unconscious or our subconscious, our implicit aspects of ourselves, all of our biases and assumptions and emotions and the whole non-rational part of us, both in the best sense of being non-rational and in the negative sense of being non-rational. And then below that, our hypothesis is that there's even a deeper layer of awareness or consciousness or reality that we can tap into that is kind of the interconnected field or the ground of all being. You know, it's been described in so many different ways that when we're in touch with that, that's something that can provide a source of energy and information and truth that transcends all of those implicit things and kind of comes through you. So as we do this training process with change agents, we're going to be teaching them some very specific skills, like we mentioned earlier about, you know, the proportion of information to experiential and how to do more effective storytelling and how to shift your narrative and how negative framing, as George Lakoff says, actually reinforces the negative. It doesn't actually change it to positive. Those are all very important things, but we're also going to be teaching practices for people to tap in to their deeper layers of consciousness or awareness. For some people, they would call it religious. For some people, they would call it spiritual. For others who are maybe more agnostic or atheist and feel uncomfortable with those words, they may just call it their own deeper sense of meaning and a purpose or calling in this world. And that when they can practice connecting with that sense of meaning, purpose, or calling with as much energy in that preparation as they do for what they're going to say, that is going to make a difference.
So maybe it's a kind of platonic base of truth, beauty, and goodness, if you will.
Yeah.
Try and find less spiritualized or religious terminology that we can tap in.
Yeah, I mean, like myself, I'm very comfortable calling it spiritual. And for me, it's every spiritual tradition that has existed over millennia has an aspect of trying to get at that deeper truth. For some people, they're going to be very comfortable saying God. You know, Martin Luther King was Christian. I mean, he was like, this is a calling from God. And other people may not feel okay with either one of those, but almost everybody understands what you mean about a deeper sense of calling or mission or purpose. That's why I love that you've called it the Global Purpose Movement. And I think the key is emphasis. People assume, of course I have a purpose, that's why I'm doing all this. They put it up on a shelf and then they move forward with all of their strategies for change. They need to not put it on the shelf. They need to keep it right in the middle of everything they're doing. And when they do that consciously, everything they say is going to carry with it a different weight, you know. I remember hearing someone say that after they give a talk, if somebody comes up to them afterwards and says, you know, that's amazing, that's incredible, so clever, so smart, what they'd rather hear, somebody came up to them and said, that is so true. And I thought, that's what you really want to hear, is you want that bell of truth to ring in someone as they're listening to you. And that's when you have that ring of truth when you're listening to someone, you can almost get chills and have the hair on the back of your neck stand up, and you feel something's happening here that's going way beyond what this person is saying. That's what motivates people to act differently. That's the feeling that we're going for when we try to make change.
Yeah, it really is. It's striking that kind of universal chord in the
Right.
heart, soul, whatever terminology, where people suddenly connect something and understand that there is a deeper purpose for why they're here, and beyond their material preoccupations, and they suddenly rediscover that calling to move forward. Isn't that what we're trying to make happen?
That's it. Yeah. That's the direct experience that we want to give people, ourselves too. You know, it's what we want to experience ourselves, give to other people. And then we provide the scaffolding of opportunities for community and ongoing teaching and, you know, all of those daily practices that people can, because that experience is easy to slip away. It can go away pretty quickly if you don't have a community of support and ways that you can integrate it into your everyday life and daily practices that you can engage in. But if you give people the scaffolding after they've had that experience, they really will be able to bring it into action and to maintain, kind of support that fledgling, fragile new worldview that's trying to emerge.
Yeah. So you've referenced this C3 project, I think you call it, consciousness community or communication and change.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us are you ready to give a little more detail about
Sure,
that? How
yeah.
far along is it? What's your
Yeah, I mean,
timeline?
basically, you know, I've been doing this research with our team here at IONS on transformation for so long. And then, you know, I really felt like in the last year, there's been just such a massive societal regression toward nationalism, isolation, war and violence, you know, degradation of women and minorities and people of color, you know, all of the things that I think are so important for us. And it feels like there's a massive regression happening right now. And so I thought, you know, as a scientist, should I just forget being a scientist and move on, go be an activist instead, because this feels really important to me? And I came to the conclusion, no, you should bring your scientific knowledge to this issue. And I've talked to now dozens of scientists who are in the same boat, neuroscientists, social scientists, people who study consciousness, and they are all wondering what they can do. They're feeling helpless about what's happening. And just, you know, you see this often, people shake their heads and they look down. You know, you bring up what's happening in the world and they shake their heads and look down. And then when I talk to them about the project and say, hey, what if we were to take cognitive science, social science, neuroscience, what we know about how people really listen and are persuaded and convinced and change their behavior, and help change agents apply that in the way that they're working, wouldn't that be great? And then you see people lift up and they're like, yes, I want to be a part of that. So
Yeah.
that's what we're doing, is bringing together kind of a cohort of scientists who are bringing what they know about how people change. Like one example is, there's great science showing that when you show somebody distressing images and you think this is going to get their compassion going, like if I just show them polar bears dying as the ice caps melt, or, you know, if I can really show sex trafficking victims and, you know, all of this stuff, okay, that's true that exposing people to that information will shock them, but strangely it will backfire because it doesn't elicit compassion, it elicits personal distress. And when people feel personal distress at that level, they are no longer motivated to deal with the issue, they're motivated to reduce their personal distress, which really is, get me out of this conversation. And that's the opposite of what you want, right? You don't want the person to want to go away from the conversation. You want them to get closer. So the question there is, we know that scientifically, we've actually put people in lab settings and we've shown them images and we've seen them avert their eyes from the screen using eye tracking software. And then we've seen what they're willing to do afterwards in terms of action is less if they've been given more distressing images than if they've been given less distressing images and a way to act. So that's just one example of one experiment that if people who are creating change know this, then they can change the way they're doing it and use that science to help. So that's the key. So we're creating a training program based on the science. And then we're also bringing in what we know from wisdom traditions about mindfulness and that source that we talked about, how to tap into that source of your true calling and allow it to come through you as you're speaking. And we hope that that will be a good scientific contribution to changing, hopefully reversing this regression. And, you know, what we hope is that what we're seeing now is the last gasp of a dying paradigm, but we also hope it's not a beginning of another dark ages. You know, we must take action now. We cannot be immune to what's happening. We can't look at it and kind of shrug our shoulders and shake our heads and think, gosh, I hope this is over soon. No one can be on the bleachers right now. Every single person has to get on the field and change what's happening.
And you're doing just that, aren't you? Getting out there on the field, don't you? You're initiating this C3 project here in the next month or two. You have some.
Yeah. So we're going to do a pilot training and November 4th, and then we're going to do the first formal training at the end of January 2018. And I would really love to see it somehow get out to, let's say, everybody who's running for midterm election offices who are working for just and sustainable causes. And you'll see that I don't talk about party when I'm talking about this. It's not Republicans versus Democrats in my mind. It's people who are working for fairness and sustainability and the rights of women and people of color and minorities who are not isolationist. So, you know, sometimes those values are found more in one party than the other. But if we can affect people who are independent or libertarian or Republican or whatever background they come from to be more in touch with their deepest source and calling, I trust that process will bring us to a better world.
I trust it will too. You've certainly got me nodding and smiling at this rather than looking away at some of the frustrations. So I think it's working. And in your own words, you've called this an invitation to join a community of dignity and justice. And I think that's something that's got to ring true in everybody's heart, no matter what background or political party you come from. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what, and it's really, it's exciting. And, you know, that's what I feel like I can do. And I really encourage the people who are watching, that may not be what you want to do, but there's something that your particular set of skills and education and networks and talents and abilities you're the only person who has that one combination. You know, that's how you are unique. We're all interconnected, but you are unique in being the only person on the planet who has your exact combination of skills and talents and resources. And I think for me, what the Global Purpose Movement is about is helping people find out what are they supposed to do with their particular set of skills and networks and resources. And it could be local, it could be global, it could be, quote, small, or it could be huge. And I say, quote, small because something we think is tiny might be end up being really huge. It could be in your neighborhood, it could be in your school, it could be in your organization, it could be out on the street. But I think that's all we can do is if we can help each person mobilize their own purpose and do it in community, we will be able to turn this around.
Well, I appreciate your optimism there. You know, and one of the other contributions to our Purpose Rising anthology that we're producing shows Ikigai Venn diagram, a kind of reason for being. And it's really, you know, what's your passion? What's your purpose? What are you good at? And what can you make money at, too?
Yeah.
Important because a lot of people get revved up, passionate, but we've all got to make a living, too. So when you take those 4 characteristics and have the overlapping circles similar to the logo that the Global Purpose movement uses. In that, you have this core that where all of those things combine and show you really what your purpose path might be in the future.
Yeah, I love that. I love that approach. I think that's great. Yeah, and I would say too that ideally, people who are working on these topics can prioritize, I don't want to call it self-care because that feels kind of cliche, but they can prioritize keeping their own body, mind, spirit system conditioned in a way that allows them to be of greatest use. And all of us have experienced probably at one time in our lives or another where we've let go of our own wellness in thinking that, I'm just going to temporarily let go of my own wellness to take care of all these other people or to advance this project. And that's very time limited and not sustainable. And so it not really able to transmit something that you don't have. So if you don't have a vision, if you don't feel healthy and well, it's really hard for you to convey to other people how they should have vision or they should be healthy and well. And so I had a mentor who passed away recently, Angeles Arian, who for most of the last third of her life would not take a meeting before noon. And she worked very hard and she impacted thousands of people. And that boundary of not meeting until noon allowed her every morning to connect with nature, to meditate, to eat well, to sleep well. And she was able to probably have 10 times the impact she would have had if she hadn't done that. So, I'm sure there's a lot of executives out there going, there's no way that I could not work until noon every day, but you'd probably do 10 times more impact than you have now if you could do that.
Yes, well, that's a very good point for all of us to take here. There's a lot to do with the efficacy of what we're doing and working long hours if you're exhausted and not really representing the holistic, healthy view in and of yourself, then it's pretty hard to convince others. So very, very poignant observation there. And that leads me to another thought that you've mentioned here, is that another particularly important component for a change maker is their own personal presence. That how you come off to people. Are you calm and present and all that? Would you care to speak to that aspect of change making?
Yeah, I think that sense of presence is, how do you cultivate dignity, authenticity, genuineness, trustworthiness, and those are, again, what these practices are built to do. Those are things that you can't fake, and they're things that once you stop taking care of yourself, they tend to diminish or disappear. I remember watching, for example, I think it was John Kerry in his campaign, and there were several things that kind of, or even Al Gore, both of them in their campaigns for president, there were several other things that harpooned those campaigns or their success, but they, by the end of the campaign, just looked so tired and haggard and, helpless. And they just weren't able to keep that pace, and nobody really should be able to keep that pace. And I don't know how to change that, but what I can say is I could see before it happened that it wasn't going to happen, because you could just feel the, what I guess we could call the Shakti, that you could feel that the Shakti had been drained out of their system. And so we've got to come up with a way that in the West, we don't pay a lot of attention to chi or Shakti or ki. There's the life energy that other religious and spiritual traditions and cultures talk about cultivating, and they actually see it as a real thing that must be tended to. We don't really have as much in the West, and that's something that I think we can bring to people who are change agents is not just what are you saying, how are you saying it, who are you saying it to, but what energy are you holding while you do all this work, and how does that come across in your presence?
Indeed. Yeah, we may have to have quite an extensive systems change there to give our poor politicians a little bit of break on the stress and exposure.
Yeah.
And really a system-wide change throughout our culture and society.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Are you hopeful that there are enough change makers out there to really help make this happen? It seems a little bit of a race against time here.
Mm-hmm. I am. I mean, luckily my work brings me in contact with multiple groups of people, young and old, who are taking action towards so many different aspects of these issues, from prison reform to food sustainability to abuse of women or inequity of resources. I mean, climate change, and a lot of young people are very much makers and doers in these domains, and they are different. They are a different generation than we were, where they don't really care as much about the theory. They care about it happening. So I believe that there's an enormous amount of people and innovators out there who are making progress. Where I see a little bit of a gap is the leadership, to see in the political leadership or the global leadership. It's a very difficult position to be in and to remain healthy and sane at all. And so I think a lot of healthy and sane people don't want to pursue office. On the other hand, though, if we can get more leadership that feels supported by their constituents to go be a voice of reason, to go be a voice of inspiration, I think that's one gap. And maybe, I don't think it necessarily happens through governments. It may happen through the grassroots. But we certainly need a few people on the horizon here who are inspiring leaders. I think Bernie Sanders had a beginning at that, and it was getting closer to that feeling of a collective movement. And for multitudes of reasons, that didn't take hold out in terms of the political situation in the U.S. But that was starting to have that feeling, starting to have that collective vision feeling. And I do believe that we can get there. And I think if we can bring science to it, if we can bring the technologies of both the science side of things and of the wisdom side of things, and help our leaders embody those and imbue them with these skills, it's almost like they're going to be armed. I guess it's not a great analogy, but
Empowered.
Maybe Jedi. Give them some Jedi training before they go out to fight the good fight. I think we kind of have this idea that people should just naturally know how to do all this stuff, and some people do have it naturally, but most people don't. So if you've got lots and lots of people running for office, let's give them 3, 6, 8 hours of training in things that they probably haven't heard anywhere before, and give them a little bit of a boost.
Indeed. So can we summarize that to say that maybe the flow level impact of consciousness is on the rise in general, maybe from the bottom up, maybe more of a grassroots than a leadership down kind of thing? But is that that kind of feeling you're getting?
I do. I mean, I feel that way. I feel like the young people are where it's at. The people who are in their teens and their 20s right now really need those of us who are older to both get out of the way and be supportive in whatever way we can. And there's a lot of brilliance and energy and vision there that needs some guidance, needs some pathways and some roads to go down, but in general, it's really exciting. And I think the upside of this crisis that we're going through, this what I was calling the societal regression, is that I know for sure that I'm 100 times as motivated as I was, and I was already pretty motivated to do these things. And so I think a lot of people are feeling very much rekindled in their urgency, their sense of urgency, and their desire to make better things happen. So what we are doing with the Global Purpose Movement, I think is the right thing to be doing, is giving people venues to not just talk about it, but to come together and form teams and form solutions and have each other at each other's back to do these things and, organize people.
Well, yes, thank you for those observations on the nature of crisis. Forces us all to come up with more creative solutions. So sometimes, as Barbara Marx Hubbard has often said, crisis is a pre-component or precursor to transformation, and it's a wake-up call. And the deeper the crisis gets, the more creative the solutions we create.
Yeah. I think going back to what you were talking before about dignity, and I heard the other day this interesting thing that most people know, that the word courage comes from the core word kur, which is heart.
Yes.
So doing something with courage is doing it with heart. And one that I heard that I hadn't heard before was the word confidence means kind of with fidelity, with confidence, and it's again with alignment with your values. And when you're really deeply in alignment with your values and everything's lined up between your thinking, your deeper values, your spirit, and your action, that's when you're in a position to have the greatest impact or be of the greatest use and service to the world. And your own happiness and well-being emerges from that. It's kind of like you let go of your personal gain and get in alignment with your values, your thinking, your actions, and your spirit, all moving toward this purpose. And then happiness or, meaning, fulfillment results. And that's a new model. It's a new psychological model. It's a new societal model. And the more people that we turn on to that method of not only helping the world, but finding their own happiness and meaning, the more success we'll have, I think, in spreading this. We want to have a epidemic of purpose.
Yes, we do. And you've expressed that so well here. And I think studies have corroborated this finding that, we're kind of culturally conditioned to worry about ourselves and our own material accumulations. But actually, when we kind of give up on that and delve into service to humanity and doing our part of the whole, that's when we really, truly find satisfaction and fulfillment in ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, Cassie, thank you so much for your inspiring message. Every time I talk to you, I get all revved up, and your vision and your ability to cut to the core issues and investigate them and provide the scientific evidence for creating this ecosystem really makes you a living example of this change-making agent we're all looking for. So just want to take this opportunity to thank you for being the visionary, the hard worker, and the person who serves humanity in so many ways.
Well, thank you, Emanuel. Yeah, the feeling is mutual, and it's such an honor for the Institute of Noetic Sciences to partner with the Global Purpose Movement and with you and Greenheart. I've really enjoyed every minute of our interaction with each other for the last, I think it's 3, 4, 5 years. And there's more to come. So I really just appreciate your work in the world, and glad we can be with each other and link arms to make things better for everyone.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, let's link arms, and there is more to come. As we mentioned here, the Purpose Summit is coming up November 11th and 12th. It's at the Dogpatch Studios in San Francisco. We've got lots of speakers, panelists, discussion groups, something you really won't want to miss. Cassandra Vieten will be there. I'll be there. We're hoping to welcome you all to become change agents to help you find your deepest purpose and carry this noble mission forward. So stay tuned for that. We'll be releasing our Purpose Rising anthology. Cassie's one of the contributing authors there, with a chapter on making change. So great deal to look forward to. Really, you know, in many ways, this movement is just getting started, just getting a grasp on its purpose. But I certainly look forward to working with you, Cassie, and so many like-minded people around the world as we carry this movement forward.
Thank you.
Well, thank you once again for being with us, sharing your wisdom, your presence with us, and blessings and good wishes to you, your work at IONS, and looking forward to being there and working together as we carry on. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Great day to all you listeners. Thanks for checking in. I'm Emanuel Kuntzelman. This is Global Purpose Live with Dr. Cassandra Vieten today. Thank you for joining us, for doing your utmost to find your own purpose and contribute to the cause of making the world a better place. Bye for now, and thank you so much.